When my daughter called me cheap in front of 200 wedding guests, I smiled, walked to my car, and made one phone call that canceled their $15,000 honeymoon to Italy. By the next morning, she discovered that cheap fathers don't fund luxury vacations for ungrateful daughters. What happened next will shock you. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. I'm Robert Henderson, and for 25 years, I thought I understood what it meant to be a devoted father. I built Henderson Construction from a one-man operation working out of my garage into a regional company with 43 employees and annual revenues exceeding $3 million. Every dollar I earned, every sacrifice I made, every 16-hour day I worked was for one purpose: giving my daughter Emma the life I never had growing up. Emma was my world, my greatest achievement, the reason I pushed myself beyond every limit I thought I had. Her happiness was my success metric. Her dreams were my business plan. Her future was my legacy. For 25 years, I convinced myself that her increasing demands were signs of a confident young woman who knew her worth, that her casual dismissal of my efforts was normal father-daughter dynamics, that her growing sense of entitlement was just temporary selfishness that would pass once she matured. I was wrong about everything. The wake-up call came on what should have been the happiest day of both our lives, her wedding day. Emma had been planning her wedding to Marcus for 18 months, and planning is putting it mildly. She'd approached it like a military campaign, complete with detailed budgets, vendor negotiations, and a vision that required nothing less than perfection. The venue was the historic Riverside Manor, a colonial estate overlooking the Hudson River that charged $12,000 just for the privilege of holding your event there. The flowers alone cost more than most people's cars. The photographer was flown in from California because apparently local photographers weren't sophisticated enough for Emma's vision. The dress was a custom creation from a boutique in Manhattan that specialized in making brides feel like royalty for one day, regardless of the cost. Every detail, every vendor, every aspect of the celebration had been selected to create the perfect fairy tale wedding that Emma had been dreaming about since childhood. And I'd paid for every penny of it without complaint, because that's what fathers do. We turn our daughters' dreams into reality, no matter what it costs us personally. The final tally was $87,000, not including the honeymoon, which was supposed to be my wedding gift to them, 2 weeks in Italy, first-class flights, 5-star hotels, private tours, the works, another $15,000 to send them off to start their married life in style. $102,000 total, which represented nearly 2 years of profit from my construction business. Money I'd saved by living modestly, driving older vehicles, postponing my own retirement, and putting Emma's happiness ahead of my own financial security. But it was worth it, I told myself, because this was my daughter's special day, and nothing was too good for her. The ceremony was flawless, a picture-perfect event that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Emma was radiant in her custom gown, Marcus was handsome in his tailored tuxedo, and the setting was everything they'd dreamed of. As I walked her down the aisle, she squeezed my arm and whispered, "Thank you for making this perfect, Dad." For a moment, all the stress, all the expense, all the months of planning felt worthwhile. This was why I'd worked so hard, why I'd sacrificed so much. To see my daughter happy, to give her the wedding of her dreams, to be the father who could make anything possible. The reception was equally spectacular. The band was phenomenal, the food was restaurant quality, the decorations transformed the venue into something from a fairy tale. Guests were taking photos constantly, marveling at the elegance and attention to detail. Emma and Marcus looked like royalty, dancing and laughing and basking in the celebration of their love. Everything was going exactly as planned until the father-daughter dance. It's a tradition I'd been looking forward to for months, the moment when the father gets to have one last dance with his daughter before officially handing her over to her new husband. We'd chosen "Isn't She Lovely" by Stevie Wonder, the same song I'd sung to her as a baby. As we danced, surrounded by guests who were watching and smiling, Emma looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Dad, I know this wedding cost you a lot of money." I smiled, thinking she was about to express gratitude for the sacrifice I'd made to give her this perfect day. "Emma, you're worth every penny. This is exactly what you deserve." But her expression didn't soften the way I'd expected. Instead, she looked almost embarrassed. "That's the problem, Dad. Some of my friends have been asking questions about the budget, about why certain things seem so scaled back, scaled back." I looked around at the opulent reception, at the crystal chandeliers and silk linens and elaborate floral arrangements that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. "What do you mean, scaled back?" "Well, like the champagne toast. It's Prosecco, not real champagne. And the appetizer selection is smaller than what the Richardsons had at their daughter's wedding." "People notice these things, Dad." I stared at my daughter, trying to process what she was saying. The Prosecco had cost $43 per bottle, and we'd ordered 6 cases. The appetizer selection included smoked salmon, prime rib sliders, and jumbo shrimp cocktail. It was hardly what anyone would call modest. "Emma, this reception cost more than most people spend on their entire weddings." "I know that, Dad, but it's not about the total cost. It's about the details that show people how much thought and investment went into the event. When you cut corners on things like champagne, it sends a message." "What message is that?" "That maybe we couldn't afford to do it right. That we had to make compromises because of budget constraints." The song was still playing, we were still dancing, guests were still watching and smiling, but something fundamental was shifting between us. My daughter, on her wedding day, was complaining that my $87,000 investment wasn't quite impressive enough for her social circle. "Emma, I spent nearly 2 years of business profits on this wedding. I don't think anyone could reasonably call that cheap or corner-cutting." Her face flushed, and I could see her struggling to find a way to explain her position without sounding completely ungrateful. "It's not about being cheap, Dad. It's about priorities. About understanding that when you're creating an event like this, every detail matters. People judge the whole experience based on small things like the quality of champagne. People like the Richardsons. People like everyone here, Dad. This is our social circle now. Marcus's family, my college friends, our professional contacts. First impressions matter in ways you might not understand." Might not understand. Because apparently, the man who had built a $3 million business from nothing didn't understand the importance of first impressions or professional relationships. "So what you're saying is that despite spending $87,000 on your wedding, I've somehow embarrassed you by not spending enough." The music was winding down. Our dance was almost over, but Emma wasn't finished explaining how I'd failed to meet her standards. "Not embarrassed, exactly. But yes, there are certain expectations when you're hosting an event like this, and when you cut corners on quality, people notice and make assumptions." "Assumptions about what?" "About our family's financial situation, about whether we really belong in this social circle, about whether we can afford the lifestyle we're trying to project." The song ended, and we separated as the band transitioned to music for general dancing. But our conversation was far from over. Emma glanced around at the reception, at her friends and new in-laws who were mingling and enjoying the party I'd funded. "Look, Dad, I appreciate everything you've done, but I need you to understand that this isn't just about tonight. This is about how Marcus and I are going to be perceived in our community going forward. And you're worried that my financial contributions don't project the right image? I'm worried that when you make decisions based on saving money instead of maintaining quality, it reflects on all of us." I looked at this young woman I'd raised, standing there in her $4,000 dress, surrounded by decorations that cost more than most people's cars, criticizing the quality of my financial sacrifice because it wasn't quite luxurious enough for her new social aspirations. The conversation might have ended there, with me swallowing my hurt feelings and promising to do better next time, but Emma apparently wasn't finished making her point. As we rejoined the reception, she pulled me aside near the gift table, where hundreds of envelopes containing wedding checks were stacked in elegant silver boxes. "Dad, I want to talk to you about something else." "What now, Emma?" "The honeymoon. Marcus and I have been talking, and we're wondering if we could make some upgrades to the itinerary. I'd already booked them 2 weeks in Italy, first-class flights, 5-star hotels in Rome, Florence and Venice, private tours of the Vatican and Uffizi Gallery, dinner reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants. It was a $15,000 gift that would give them memories to last a lifetime. What kind of upgrades? Well, we'd like to extend the trip by a few days and add Monaco to the itinerary. Marcus has friends there, and it would be amazing to see the French Riviera while we're in Europe. How much would that cost? Only about $5,000 more. We could stay at the Hotel Hermitage, do some shopping in Monte Carlo, maybe take a yacht excursion. Only $5,000 more. On top of the $15,000 I'd already committed to spending, plus the $87,000 I'd just spent on the wedding. $20,000 for their honeymoon, while I was still figuring out how to rebuild my savings account after depleting it for their perfect day. Emma, I think the Italy itinerary I've planned is already pretty spectacular. It is, Dad, but this is our once-in-a-lifetime honeymoon. We'll never have another opportunity like this. You'll have opportunities to travel throughout your marriage. This doesn't have to be the most expensive vacation you'll ever take. Her expression changed, disappointment replacing the hopeful excitement she'd been showing. Dad, you're being cheap again. Cheap, there it was, the word that would define this moment forever. After spending over $100,000 on her wedding and honeymoon, after sacrificing 2 years of business profits to give her everything she'd asked for, I was cheap because I wouldn't add another $5,000 to an already extravagant gift. I'm being practical, Emma. I've already spent a significant amount of money on this wedding and your honeymoon. But you can afford it, can't you? The business is doing well, you're successful. $5,000 shouldn't be a big deal for someone in your position. It's not about whether I can afford it. It's about whether it's reasonable to keep expanding the budget every time you think of something else you want. Emma looked around the reception, at her friends who were dancing and laughing and enjoying the party, then back at me with something that looked like embarrassment. Dad, please don't make this about money in front of everyone. People are watching. People are watching? Emma, we're having a private conversation about your honeymoon budget. But you're being cheap about it, and if people overhear... She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood the implication. She was worried that her friends would overhear her father refusing to fund additional luxuries for their honeymoon, and that this would somehow reflect poorly on our family's financial status. Emma, let me make sure I understand this correctly. I've spent $87,000 on your wedding, $15,000 on your honeymoon, and now you're calling me cheap because I won't add another $5,000 for Monaco? It's not about the money, Dad. It's about being supportive of the most important time in my life. How is refusing to fund a yacht excursion in Monaco being unsupportive of your marriage? Because it shows that you're putting financial considerations ahead of my happiness. The conversation was drawing attention now, despite Emma's concerns about people watching. Her voice had risen, and several guests were glancing in our direction with curiosity. I could see Marcus approaching, probably sensing that his new wife was having some kind of disagreement with her father. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. I have put your happiness ahead of financial considerations for your entire life. I've spent over $100,000 on this wedding and honeymoon because I wanted to give you everything you dreamed of. Then why are you stopping now? Because there has to be a limit somewhere. Because $20,000 for a honeymoon is already incredibly generous. Because I can't keep increasing the budget every time you think of something else you want. Marcus had joined us now, putting a protective arm around Emma's waist and looking at me with confusion. Is everything okay here? Dad's being cheap about our honeymoon, Emma said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. He won't let us go to Monaco because he doesn't want to spend the extra money. Marcus looked uncomfortable, probably realizing that this was not the kind of family drama he wanted associated with his wedding day. Mr. Henderson, maybe we should discuss this privately. But Emma wasn't finished. No, I think this needs to be said. Dad, you've worked hard and been successful, but you're still thinking like someone who grew up poor. You're afraid to spend money on quality, afraid to live up to the lifestyle you can actually afford. Thinking like someone who grew up poor. In front of 200 wedding guests, my daughter was psychoanalyzing my financial decisions and attributing them to childhood poverty that had supposedly left me damaged and unable to spend appropriately. Emma, that's enough. No, it's not enough. You spent all this money on the wedding, but then you cut corners on things like champagne because you're fundamentally cheap. You're generous when it comes to big gestures, but you're petty about the details that actually matter to people. The nearby guests weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. They were openly staring at the spectacle of the bride calling her father cheap at her own wedding reception. I could see shock, embarrassment, and second-hand discomfort on faces throughout the room. Emma, we're not going to do this here. Why not here? Because you're embarrassed that people will know how cheap you really are. That was it. The moment when 25 years of devoted fatherhood crystallized into perfect clarity about what my daughter actually thought of me. I wasn't a loving father who'd sacrificed to give her everything she wanted. I was a cheap man who embarrassed her in front of her social circle by refusing to fund every luxury she could imagine. I looked around at the reception I'd funded, at the guests who were witnessing this public humiliation, at my daughter who was standing there in her expensive dress calling me cheap because I wouldn't add Monaco to her already extravagant honeymoon. You're absolutely right, Emma, I said quietly. I am cheap. Too cheap to continue funding the lifestyle of someone who has so little respect for my sacrifices. I walked away from her, ignoring her calls for me to come back, ignoring Marcus's attempts to smooth things over, ignoring the whispered conversations that were starting throughout the reception. I went directly to the parking lot, got in my truck, and drove home. The first call I made was to my travel agent. Hi, this is Robert Henderson. I need to cancel the Italy honeymoon package for Emma Henderson and Marcus Williams. Complete cancellation, full refund? Mr. Henderson, the wedding is today, isn't it? Are you sure you want to cancel their honeymoon? I'm completely sure. Cancel everything. Flights, hotels, tours, restaurant reservations, all of it. Sir, there will be significant cancellation fees for such short notice. I don't care about the fees. Cancel it all. The second call was to my credit card company to dispute the charges for the Monaco extension that Emma had apparently already started planning without my approval. It turned out she'd been working with the travel agent to add the extra days, assuming I'd agree to pay for them once presented with the completed itinerary. The third call was to my bank to stop payment on the $15,000 check I'd written to cover the honeymoon expenses. By the time Emma and Marcus returned from their reception, they were going to discover that cheap fathers don't fund luxury vacations for daughters who publicly humiliate them. My phone started ringing at 11:47 p.m., long after the reception had ended, and the reality of their situation had set in. Emma's name on the caller ID, probably calling from the bridal suite at the hotel where I'd booked them for their wedding night. Dad? We need to talk. Her voice was different now, smaller, like she was beginning to understand that actions have consequences. Hello, Emma. How was the rest of your reception? Dad, please. I know you're angry, but we need to figure this out. Our flights to Rome are supposed to leave tomorrow afternoon. What flights to Rome? Don't do this, Dad. I know you're upset about what I said, but you can't just cancel our entire honeymoon because of one argument. I can't. Emma, watch me. I canceled everything. Flights, hotels, tours, restaurant reservations, all of it. You wanted to know how cheap I really am? Now you know. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could picture her in that hotel room, still wearing her wedding dress, trying to process the fact that her honeymoon had just evaporated along with her father's patience. But Dad, we told everyone we were going to Italy. We have 2 weeks off work. We've been planning this for months. Then I guess you'll have to figure out alternative plans. Maybe Marcus's family can help you, since they apparently understand quality and financial appropriateness better than I do. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things I said. Yes, you did mean them, Emma. You meant every word. You think I'm cheap, you think I embarrass you, you think I don't understand how to live up to the lifestyle I can afford. Well, now you get to find out what actually cheap looks like. This is insane. You can't just destroy our honeymoon because your feelings got hurt. My feelings didn't get hurt, Emma. My eyes got opened. For 25 years, I've been funding your life while you've been taking my generosity for granted. Tonight, in front of 200 people, you made it clear exactly how little you value what I've provided." I could hear Marcus in the background, asking what was happening, probably trying to understand how their perfect wedding day had turned into a financial disaster. "Dad, please. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. Just don't do this. Emma, you can't make this right with apologies. This isn't about hurt feelings or temporary anger. This is about respect, and you've shown me exactly how much respect you have for your father." "I do respect you. You know I respect you." "No, Emma, you respect my bank account. You respect my willingness to fund your lifestyle. But you don't respect me as a person, and you proved that tonight when you called me cheap in front of everyone at your wedding." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Emma cycling through anger, bargaining, and desperation as she tried to find some way to reverse the consequences of her public humiliation. But I'd made my decision, and unlike her wedding budget, this was one area where I wouldn't be negotiating or making compromises. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Emma, Marcus, and several wedding guests who'd witnessed the drama had apparently spent the night trying to reach me. The messages ranged from angry demands that I restore their honeymoon to pleading requests for reconciliation. But the most interesting message came from Emma's maid of honor, Jessica, who'd been her best friend since college. "Mr. Henderson, I was at the wedding last night, and I heard what Emma said to you. I just wanted you to know that a lot of us were shocked by how she spoke to you. After everything you've done for her, she had no right to call you cheap in front of everyone. I hope you two can work this out, but I understand why you're angry." So it wasn't just me. Other people had recognized how inappropriate Emma's behavior had been, how ungrateful and disrespectful she'd sounded while criticizing the man who just spent over $100,000 on her happiness. The validation felt good, but it didn't change the fundamental problem. My daughter had shown me exactly who she'd become, and it wasn't someone I particularly liked or respected. At 2:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before their original flight to Rome was supposed to depart, Emma called one final time. "Dad, our friends are asking why we're not on our way to the airport." What am I supposed to tell them? "Tell them the truth, Emma. Tell them your cheap father decided not to fund your honeymoon after you publicly humiliated him at your wedding." I can't tell them that. Why not? It's exactly what happened. Because it makes me look terrible. Emma, you should look terrible. You acted terribly. You treated your father with complete disrespect in front of 200 people, and now you're facing the consequences of that choice. But what about Marcus? He didn't do anything wrong. Why should he be punished for something I said? Marcus isn't being punished. He's married to someone who thinks it's appropriate to call her father cheap after he spends $100,000 on her wedding. He's learning about the woman he married, just like I learned about the daughter I raised. So that's it? You're just going to let this destroy our relationship? I'm not destroying anything, Emma. I'm simply matching my level of financial support to your level of respect and gratitude. You want to call me cheap? Fine. Now you get to experience what cheap actually looks like. 3 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter on expensive stationery, Emma's careful penmanship covering 3 pages of what looked like genuine remorse. "Dear Dad," it began, "I've been thinking about what happened at my wedding, and I need to tell you how sorry I am for the way I spoke to you. Marcus and I ended up taking our honeymoon at a resort in the Catskills that we paid for ourselves, and it gave me a lot of time to think about how ungrateful I've become. You're right, that I don't respect you the way I should. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing your generosity as something I deserved instead of something I should be thankful for. I started judging your gifts based on what other people might think instead of appreciating the sacrifice you made to provide them. When I called you cheap at my wedding, I wasn't just being ungrateful. I was being cruel to the person who has given me everything. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, and I understand why you canceled our honeymoon. I deserved that consequence, and Marcus understands why you did it. We both realize that we need to rebuild our relationship with you based on respect instead of expectation. I don't know if you'll ever want to be generous with us again, but if you do, I promise I'll receive whatever you give with gratitude instead of criticism. I love you, Dad, and I'm ashamed of the person I became when I forgot to appreciate the father I have. Your daughter, Emma. I read the letter 3 times, looking for the manipulation I'd learned to expect, the subtle requests for restored privileges disguised as apology. But it wasn't there. For the first time in years, Emma had written to me without wanting anything except the possibility of rebuilding what her behavior had damaged. 2 days later, I called her. She answered on the first ring. "Dad? I got your letter." "Oh, good. I wasn't sure if you'd read it." "I read it 3 times, and I think it's a start." I could hear her exhale, a sound of relief and hope and uncertainty all mixed together. "Does that mean we can try to fix this?" "We can try, Emma, but it's going to be different this time. I'm not going back to funding every luxury you can imagine, and you can't go back to treating my generosity like an entitlement." "I know. I don't want to go back to that either. I want to earn your respect back. It's going to take time." "I know. I have time." We talked for 2 hours, really talked, about the wedding, about her expectations, about my disappointments, about how we could build a healthier relationship going forward. She told me about their budget honeymoon, about learning to appreciate experiences that didn't cost a fortune, about understanding for the first time what financial independence actually meant. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, and for the first time since that terrible night at her wedding, I felt like I was talking to my daughter instead of someone who saw me as a personal ATM. 6 months later, Emma and Marcus invited me to dinner at their apartment. Not at an expensive restaurant, but at their home, where Emma had cooked my favorite meal herself. After dinner, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "It's a payment plan for the wedding." I opened the envelope and found a detailed spreadsheet showing the $87,000 I'd spent on her wedding, broken down by category with a payment schedule that would allow her and Marcus to reimburse me over the next 5 years. "Emma, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. I want to. I want to pay back every penny, not because you're demanding it, but because I want to understand the value of what you gave me, and because I want our relationship to be based on respect instead of debt. This is going to take you years to pay off." "Good. It'll remind me every month for the next 5 years how much my father loves me and what that love cost you when I was too selfish to appreciate it." I looked at this young woman, who had once called me cheap in front of 200 wedding guests, who had learned through consequence and reflection what gratitude actually meant, and I realized that canceling her honeymoon had been the best thing I'd ever done for our relationship. "I'm proud of you," I said. "Not for the payment plan, for growing up. I had a good teacher," she replied. "He just had to stop enabling me long enough for the lessons to sink in." If you've enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments about parenting, boundaries, and the difference between generosity and enabling. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop funding the lifestyle of people who don't appreciate what you provide. The greatest gift I ever gave my daughter wasn't her perfect wedding or her planned honeymoon. It was teaching her that respect and gratitude aren't optional parts of family relationships. They're the foundation that makes love sustainable over time. Because real love isn't about giving someone everything they want, it's about helping them become someone worth loving. And sometimes that means letting them face the consequences of their choices, even when those consequences are expensive and embarrassing. Emma learned that weddings are just one day, but character lasts a lifetime. And I learned that being a good father sometimes means being willing to be seen as a cheap father until your child grows up enough to understand the difference.